Hello, everyone. It's Dr. Wyman again, and we're going to be talking about Chapter 3 of Microeconomics. So let me share my screen here. And let's get started right away. Okay. So Chapter 3 is a very important chapter because it's about market demand and supply. And this is pretty much what people think about when they think about the market and how it works. So we want to make sure that we understand this concept. And as we go through this, you're going to see quite a few charts, and those would be very helpful to you when you're taking your quizzes or exams. So make sure that you are reading those charts and really looking at them and trying to understand them, because they will help you. At our previous chapters, we learned about ceteris paribus, which means all else remains the same. So it's like anything else. You can't throw 5 different things at a problem and expect to know what actually fixed the problem, because you have too many variables. So what we want to look at to learn about economics is what is the one thing that's changing or the one thing that's staying the same. So we want to know what the treatment is to make sure that we understand exactly what's happening in the market. So we're going to see this a lot throughout this entire course. So you really need to know that ceteris paribus means all else remains the same. So we're going to look at demand first, and then, as you might suspect, supply is pretty much just the opposite. So the law of demand, the definition, is the principle that there is an inverse or opposite relationship between the price of a good and the quantity buyers are willing to purchase in a defined time period, ceteris paribus. So all this is saying is that when the price goes up, less people purchase an item, and when the price goes down, more people purchase it. And also we're looking in, when we're talking about this situation, you have to think in generalities for this. So this may not be true for you or your family, but it's true in the general population. So just keep that in mind. So what is demand? A curve or schedule showing the various quantities of product consumers are willing to purchase at possible prices during a specified period of time, ceteris paribus. So what you're going to be seeing as we come up is, like, if a price is this amount, how many people would purchase that item? If it's this amount, how much would people purchase? How many items would they purchase? So we want to keep that in mind also. So you can do this in 2 ways. You can do it on a schedule, which is just like a, table, right, as a schedule. So you have columns of things that have headings at the top, and then you can see what happens. And you can also put it on a graph. And remember, we talked about graphs are just diagrams of what's happening. So it's just a physical representation of what's happening, so you can kind of understand it in a, like a picture form. And then market demand is a total of individual demand schedules. So you can imagine market demand, how many products are there in our local grocery stores? I mean, the market demand is huge. So we want to think about that in terms of each particular group of products or section of products, because you're not really seeing, you'll see like an overall demand in like consumer confidence or something like that when you're watching the news, but you're not going to see a market demand for a whole bunch of products. You're going to see like one particular product. Those are basically what we're looking at here. So an individual buyer's demand schedule for Blu-ray discs, Blu-rays, are, if you look at here, you have point A through D and the price per Blu-ray and the quantity demanded. So if the price for a Blu-ray is $20, the demand per the year is going to be $4, 4 discs. If it's $15, it's going to be 6 discs. If it's $10, it'll be 10. If it's $5, it's 16. So you can see that as the price decreases, the quantity demanded also will increase. So the demand curve is a curve that shows the quantities of a good or service that people are willing and able to buy at different prices. So the next screen is a curve. So this is the demand curve for Blu-rays. This isn't for the entire amount of products that are available on the market. This is just for one product. So an individual buyer's demand curve for Blu-rays. So we just saw on the screen, the prior screen, that if it's $20, we're going to have 4. If it's $15, we're going to have 8 or 6, I guess. $10, we're going to have 10. And $5, we're going to have 16. So this is the demand curve for Blu-rays per year. So what does a negative or a demand curve, I'm sorry, I feel like I'm talking so fast. I'm going to try to slow down. Why does a demand curve have a negative slope? As the price per unit of a good or service falls, buyers can afford to buy more units per period of time. So you understand this just intuitively. If you have an X amount of dollars in your pocket and you want to buy a candy bar and you find that you have, say you have $5 and the candy bar that you want last week, it was $3, you would buy one candy bar. But then when you got to the store, you saw that instead of $3, it was on sale for $2.25. So you might buy 2 candy bars. So you can, depending on the price of the good, you can buy more units. So as the price falls, you can buy more. Market demand schedule for Blu-rays. Again, we have 2 people here, Mary and Fred. So if the price is $25, Fred can afford to buy 1, Mary can't. So the total demand is 1. When the price drops to 20, Fred can buy 2 and Mary can buy 1. So the total demand is 3. And that continues right on. So when the price of Blu-rays is 5, Fred can buy 5 and Mary 7. So the total demand is 12 for the year. And we're going to see this on these curves right here. We have Fred's demand curve, Mary's demand curve, and the total market demand curve. So we can see that Fred, at 20, he can buy 2. And Mary can buy 1. And so the market demand curve would be 3. And at 5, Fred's going to buy 5, Mary's going to buy 7, and the total demand is going to be 12. So that schedule that we saw in the previous slide, you could do all of those points on this graph and see, exactly where everything would lie. So there's a big difference between price changing and quantity, affecting quantity demanded, and demand curve shifts. So quantity demanded is always related to price. And then there are demand curve shifts, which are not related to price. And we're going to go through that. So price changes cause a change in quantity demanded and a shift along the demand curve, but the demand curve itself does not shift. So just like we had said before, if the price goes down, you're going to purchase more items, or people will purchase that item more. The price of a good may change, but buyers still want that good. If the price goes up, less people purchase the good. If the price goes down, more people purchase the good. So we have a couple of examples I was thinking about are gasoline and cigarettes. When the price of gasoline goes up, people purchase less gasoline. Now you may be saying, well, I can't buy less gasoline. I still have to get to work and I still have to, go to the grocery store or whatever, but you're not going to be buying as much gasoline for, say, your you might not take your boat out, or if you had a motorcycle or two cars, you might just use one car or not use your motorcycle. So people are discouraged from buying gasoline. This is something that happened when we had I know that you guys are young and I'm an old person, but back in the 70s, there were some gasoline shortages. So the price kept going up because the government was trying to reduce demand for the quantity demanded for gasoline. So the price kept going up. And I think there was a time in the early 2000s this was happening too. I lived in Maine at that time. And I remember I was paying almost $5 a gallon for gas. So, we weren't using gas to go out and, run a snowmobile or something like that. We were using gas to go back and forth to work for the things that we absolutely needed to do, not for pleasure. And then the same thing with cigarettes. The price of cigarettes you see is going up all the time. I think, and I don't know what it is here. I guess it's around $5 a pack. I don't really know. But I know there are states, I think New York, it's over $10 a pack. So that's a discouragement from buying cigarettes. And one thing that was happening was, of course, the government and insurance companies are trying to get people to stop smoking. And one way that they can do that is try to encourage higher cigarette prices, thinking that people won't be able to afford it, so less people will be smoking. So that would, affect the price, affects the amount supplied to the market. So movement along a demand curve versus a shift in demand. So this is the first slide of 2. So if we increase in quantity demanded, we're still looking at the price per Blu-ray and the quantity of Blu-rays. And these are in dollars and these are millions per year. I'm just going to say 15 and 20 because it's just easier to say. Takes less effort. But okay, so you can see an increase in quantity demanded. So at the amount of dollars for $15, we're going to have a demand of 20 discs, right? So you can see that with the dotted line. So 15, we're going to have 20. At the price of 10, we're going to have 30 demanded. So as the price goes down, the quantity supplied, or not supplied, I'm sorry, the quantity demanded goes up. So changes other than price cause the whole demand curve to shift. So when that happens, there is a change in demand. So this means the whole market shifts right or left. If it shifts to the right, it's an increase in demand. If it shifts to the left, it's a decrease in demand. So non-price determinants are tastes and preferences, income, buyers' expectations, and prices of related goods. So buyers either are no longer purchasing the good or more buyers want to purchase the good. Either way, it is a change in the demand curve, but there is no movement along the curve. So there's no price change. So what if the price stays the same and there's an increase, more people want to buy that item, the whole demand curve will shift to the right. So what we're showing here is this is a movement along a demand curve versus a shift in demand. So what's going to happen here is at $15, we have a demand of 20. But if it stays at 15, then, and what's going to happen is we have a demand for 30 then. So that means the whole demand curve shifted. It had nothing to do with price. So people are realizing the benefits of Blu-ray or some other reason. They got a raise and now they can afford to buy it. So at $15, more people want to buy that Blu-ray product. So The demand now has moved to 30. So the demand curve shifted to the right. So this is the terminology that we're going to use in this little chart right here, or table, I guess this is not a chart. We have a change, price increases, and this is something else that would be very beneficial to you to have at your ready when you're taking tests and quizzes. The change in price increases, there's an upward movement along the demand curve. There's a decrease in the quantity demanded. If the price decreases, there's a downward movement along the demand curve, increase in the quantity demanded. A non-price reason, determinant just means reason, leftward or rightward shift in the demand curve, the decrease or increase in demand. That's an overall decrease or increase in demand. And this just shows you, again, the same things that are happening. I'm going to put all these up, and then, so you have the price per unit and the quantity of goods or services per unit. So if the change in non-price determinant causes a decrease in demand, it moves to the left. If there's a change in non-price determinant cause, it moves to the right. And a change in price is moving up and down this line right here. So let's move on to normal goods. Any good for which there is a direct relationship between changes in income and its demand curve. So any good for which there is a direct relationship between changes in income and its demand curve. So as income goes up, the demand for that good goes up. So think about, like a expensive car. So suddenly, you got a $50,000 raise, we'll say. Wouldn't that be nice? And now you can afford a Lexus car, right? So there's a higher demand for that car because your income went up, not because of any other reason. So what does a direct relationship between price and quantity mean? One variable, price, increases, the other variable, quantity, increases, and vice versa. So a direct relationship means one variable increases, the other variable increases. So what's an inferior good? Any good for which there is an inverse means opposite, relationship between changes in income and its demand curve. So it doesn't matter, there may be changes in income, but you're still going to buy that Ford. You're not going to buy that Lexus. So what does an inverse relationship between price and quantity mean? One variable, the price increases, the other variable, the quantity decreases, and vice versa. So that's an inferior good. So a substitute good is a good that competes with another good for consumer purchases, such as store brands, right? I know I buy store brands sometimes because the quality of the store brand is what I'm willing to accept. So, and I don't see a difference in the brand name, so I will buy a store brand. That's a substitute good. So I'm substituting Walmart brand peas for Green Giant peas, for example. So what happens when the price increases for a good that has a substitute? The demand curve for the substitute good increases. And what happens when the price decreases for a good that has a substitute? The demand curve for the substitute good decreases. So the price increases for a good that has a substitute, the demand curve for the substitute good increases. So what that means is if there's a price increase for Green Giant, I'm going to go to Walmart brand, right? The demand curve for the substitute good increases. So there's going to be a higher demand for the substitute good because the name brand good increased its price. And what happens when the price decreases for a good that has a substitute? The opposite happens. It's like, okay, I think that the price of Green Giant peas went down 50 cents. I'm going to buy that instead of buying the substitute good of the Walmart brand, which really didn't have a price decrease at all. So I'm willing to spend an extra 5 cents for the Green Giant, but I'm not willing to spend an extra 75 cents. And this is how, I mean, people are doing this intuitively. They're not really thinking like that, but that's really what it means. So what is a complementary good? A complementary good is a good that is jointly consumed with another good. So for example, hot dogs and mustard, right? What happens when the price increases for a good that has a complement? The demand curve for the complementary good decreases because people aren't buying the first good, right? So if hot dogs increase their price, so they double, people are going to not buy as many hot dogs, so they're not going to buy as much mustard. So the demand for the mustard goes down. So what happens when the price decreases for a good that has a complement? The demand curve for the complementary good goes up. So if hot dogs are suddenly 2 packages for $1, people are going to buy more hot dogs and they're going to buy the complementary good. In my case, it's mustard, but I don't really eat hot dogs that much. But you know, so it's just depending on what happens to that good that has a complement. It's the same thing with anything. Like if you had you know, I can't, like shampoo, right? And combs, or shampoo and conditioner, I guess would be a better example, right? If the shampoo price goes up, then the demand for that shampoo is going to go down, and the demand for the complementary good, which would be the conditioner, is going to go down too, and vice versa. So we're going to look at all of these. These are really nice graphs that I think will help you a lot if you study them a little bit. So a non-price determinant of the demand is the number of buyers, right? The relationship to changes in the demand curve, shift in the demand curve, and then some examples. So these examples should help you understand these graphs quite a bit. So we have the relationship is a direct relationship. So for example, if there's an immigration from Mexico increases the demand for Mexican food products in grocery stores. It's the overall market for Mexican foods. It's not just tortillas, it's everything. There's going to be a direct relationship between the price and the quantity demanded. So this is going to move the demand to the higher quantity regardless of the price. So because we have more buyers in the market, the quantity of Mexican food is going to increase. So if there's a decline in the birth rate, that reduces the demand for baby clothes. So we're going to have, it doesn't matter what the price is. We don't have enough, we don't have as many babies, so you're just not buying baby clothes. For a non-price determinant of demand, tastes and preferences, the relationship is direct. And the example is, for no reason, consumers want Beanie Babies and demand increases. So the whole demand curve moves to the right. We had the same situation with Cabbage Patch Kids. Maybe you have a Cabbage Patch doll at home, or your sisters or mothers did, but it was the same situation. For no reason, suddenly the Cabbage Patch Kid dolls took off. So it was tastes and preferences that drove that demand. After a while, the fad dies and the demand declines. So the market now for Cabbage Patch Kids and Beanie Babies is way down. So the non-price determinant is income for normal good, and we're looking at normal goods. The relationship changes to direct. Consumers' incomes increase and the demand for steaks increase. And a decline in income decreases the demand for air travel. And so the demand shifts. So we just saw this with the COVID-19, right? Air travel decreased significantly during the pandemic last year. Non-price determinant, inferior goods. The relationship is inverse, means opposite. The shift in the demand curve. The example is consumers' incomes increase and the demand for hamburgers decreases. So the demand goes down. Now, why would their demand for hamburgers decrease? Because now they're buying steaks. So the inferior goods, a decline in income increases the demand for bus service, right? So there's a demand there, but now they're not flying, they're taking buses. Another non-price determinant, expectations of buyers. The relationship is direct. So the shift in the demand curve, for this example, consumers expect that gasoline will be in short supply next month and that prices will rise sharply. Consequently, consumers fill the tanks in their cars for this month and there is an increase in demand for gasoline. And months later, consumers expect the price of gas to fall and the demand for gasoline decreases. So what do people think is going to happen, right? So another non-price determinant is the prices of related goods or substitute goods. The relationship to changes in the demand curve are direct. Example, a reduction in the price of tea decreases the demand for coffee. So people are drinking more tea than coffee. So the demand for tea increases. And an increase in the price of airfares causes higher demand for bus transportation. So bus transportation is going to go up and airfare or air travel is going to go down. So one of the things you have to think about on these charts is, okay, what is actually in demand, right? And what is the cause, right? So in this case, tea is in demand, and coffee is not. So in this case, the buses are in demand and the airlines are not. So another non-determinant of demand is a complementary good. The relationship is inverse. Shift in the demand curve. An example is a decline in the price of cellular services increases the demand for cell phones. So the cost of the service is less, people are going to buy more phones. So the quantity demanded is higher for cell phones. And a higher price for peanut butter decreases the demand for jelly. So they go together, usually peanut butter and jelly. So if peanut butter, the price increases, the demand for jelly goes down. So supply, we're moving into supply now, which is going to, this is going to look very familiar, except you're on the opposite side. You're on the producer side instead of the consumer side. So producers supply consumers. So, and also demand always drives supply. The principle that there is a direct relationship between the price of a good and the quantity sellers are willing to offer for sale in a defined time period, ceteris paribus, right? All things remaining equal. So what's supply? A curve or schedule showing the various quantities of a product sellers are willing to produce and offer for sale at possible prices during a specified period of time, ceteris paribus. So what is market supply? The summation of all the quantities supplied at various prices that might prevail in a market. And here's an individual seller's schedule for Blu-rays, right? So at $20 per Blu-ray, the quantity supplied is going to be 50,000 per year. At $15, it's 45. At 10, it's 35. And at 5, it's 20. So you can see here that as the price goes down, sellers are offering less for sale. Why? Because they want to get $20, right? So when it's $20, they want to hit the market at the high. When it's at $5, it's like, well, we can be making other products that we can get a higher price for. So this would be an opportunity cost is what we're talking about here. If it's 5, they're going to spend that item, they're going of a quantity of some other item, that 30,000 difference, they're going to be making something else that they can sell at $20 rather than this at 5. So an individual seller's supply curve for Blu-ray, and we're on supply now, not demand. The price for the Blu-ray at 20 to 0, and the quantity of Blu-rays from 0 to 50. So it's the same thing except opposite, same but opposite. So, I'll go back to that previous slide. So at $20, sellers are willing to supply 50,000 Blu-rays a year, right? At 15, they're willing to supply 45,000 per year. At 10, they're willing to supply 35,000, and at 5, they're willing to supply 20. So you can see if they're selling, selling at $20, they're going to supply more. If they're selling at $5, they're going to supply less. So why does the supply curve have a positive slope? Only at a higher price will it be profitable for sellers to incur the higher opportunity costs with producing and supplying a larger quantity. So producers are going to produce what they can at the highest prices. One little caveat to this, though, is that you can't predict the future. And you really can't predict consumer preferences. The consumers are fickle. 1 minute, Beanie Babies and Cabbage Patch Dolls are, off the charts. They can't keep the supply going. But then suddenly something else comes along that catches consumers' eyes, and they're off of Beanie Babies and Cabbage Patch Dolls, and they're going to do something else. Well, now suppliers have already produced that product. So you're going to have a surplus of that product. And what's going to happen is the sellers are going to start reducing the price to get rid of that surplus. So, and they're going to change their production to something else where they can get that higher price. So the market supply schedule for Blu-rays, we're going to see this quantity supplied. This is by the sellers. This is Entertain City and High Vibes. These are producers. These are not consumers. So they're going to produce a total of 60. They're going to supply 60 Blu-rays at $25 each. This would be 60,000. They're going to supply 50,000 at 20 because these people, this Entertainment City, they're going to produce 20, they're going to produce 15, 10, and 5, and this is what they're producing. So the total supply is going to go down with the price being reduced. So let's look at this market supply curve for Blu-rays. So we have Entertain City, High Vibes equals the market surplus. So at $15, they're going to supply 15,000. At $15, High Vibes is going to supply 25,000. So the entire market supply is going to be 40,000. So you can see how filling this in at 25, they're going to produce 25,000, at 25, 35,000, at 25, 60,000. So 25 plus 35 is 60. So this is what the market supply curve is going to look like. Price changes cause a change in quantity supplied and a shift along the supply curve, but the supply curve does not shift. So the price of a good may change, but sellers still produce that good. If the price of the good goes up, more people produce the good. If the price of the good goes down, less people produce the good. So movement along a supply curve versus a shift in supply. So here we have an increase in quantity supplied. Let's get this up. So you have At $10, they're supplying 30,000 Blu-rays. At $15, they're supplying 40,000. So as the price goes up, people are buying at this price at $15, they're going to supply more. So when a variable other than price changes, what is the effect on the supply curve? The whole supply curve shifts and there is a change in supply. The same thing that happened in demand. So movement along a supply curve versus a shift in supply. So let's get these up. So you have at $15, you're doing 30. And at $15, you're doing 40. So the supply shifted. There's some reason that it moved to 40 other than price. You know, people's incomes may have gone up. People may value the quality of the Blu-ray disc over whatever their other items they're using. So there was a whole shift in the supply curve. Changes other than price cause the whole supply curve to shift. When that happens, there is a change in supply. So these are non-price determinants. Numbers of sellers in the market. Remember that when something is, you know, going like hotcakes, more people are willing to produce it. So you're going to attract producers to that market, and the producers become sellers. So technology, we know technology is exponential in manufacturing, right? And as far as reducing costs go. Resources, prices. So are the resources used to produce goods and services, have they reduced in some way? Taxes and subsidies, are they higher or lower? Taxes, are subsidies higher and lower? Subsidies are things that the government uses taxpayer money to encourage or discourage producers from producing items. Expectations of producers, what do they think the market is going to be doing? And prices of other goods and services the firm could produce. So if the firm could produce, you know, rubber balls, right, instead of some other good, I'm trying to think of something, marbles, we'll say, if they can produce rubber balls and get a higher price for rubber balls than they can for marbles, they're going to do that. So terminology for changes in price and non-price determinants of supply. Price increases, upward movement along the supply curve, increase in quantity supplied. Price decreases, downward movement along the supply curve, decrease in the quantity supplied. Non-price determinant, leftward or rightward shift in the supply curve, decrease or increase in supply, not quantity supplied, supply. And this looks the same as the demand curve. It's the same thing, except we're talking about supply instead of demand. A decrease in supply for a non-determinant, non-price determinant pushes the supply curve to the left. A change in non-price determinant and increase pushes the increase in supply, the curve goes to the right, and a change in price moves along this curve right here. So we have the non-price determinant of supply, number of sellers. It's a direct relationship. So examples, the United States lowers trade restrictions on foreign textiles and the supply of textiles in the United States increases. So if the taxes are lower, more out of state or out of country textiles, which is clothing, will be coming into the markets. So for a severe drought, destroys the orange crop and the supply of oranges decreases. So if you have less oranges, the supply goes down, right? Okay, so for technology, the relationship is direct. An example is New methods of producing automobiles reduce production costs, and the supply of automobiles increases. So you have an increase in the supply curve. And technology is destroyed by war and production costs increase. The result is a decrease in the supply of any good. Non-price determinant is a resource prices. So resource prices go down. So we're talking about a price here. This is not like the price of the item. This is the resource prices. So the resource prices would be the prices that the producer is having to pay to get the raw materials to produce whatever they're making. So the relationship to changes in supply is inverse. So the shift in the supply curve, a decline in the price of computer chips increases the supply of computers because the producer can buy more chips at a reduced price. He can make, or they can make more computers. An increase in the cost of farm equipment decreases the supply of soybeans. So if it costs them more, if it costs the farmer more, they're going to reduce the supply because money is finite. So a non-price determinant of supply, taxes and subsidies, the relationship to changes in the supply curve is inverse. So the example is an increase in the per pack tax on cigarette reduces the supply of cigarettes because the producers know that less people are going to purchase cigarettes with that increased price. So we're going to have less supply. And then a direct price, a government payment to dairy farmers based on the number of gallons produced increases the supply of milk. So if the government is going to pay farmers to produce a number of gallons of milk, they're going to increase the supply. As long as the government is paying them, the taxpayers are paying them, they're going to keep producing milk. Non-determinant for supply is expectations. The relationship for is inverse. So a shift in the supply curve. We have oil companies anticipate a substantial rise in future oil prices. And this expectation causes the companies to decrease their current supply of oil. And farmers expect the future price of wheat to decline, so they increase the present supply of wheat. Okay. And so the last one of these is prices of other goods and services. It's inverse. A rise in the price of brand name drugs causes drug companies to decrease the supply of generic. So producers are going to produce what gives them the highest profit. So brand name drugs are going, in this case, are going to, they're going to produce more brand name and less generic. And that reduces the supply of generic drugs. And then a decline in the price of tomatoes causes the farmers to increase the supply of cucumbers. Because tomatoes aren't selling at the higher price, they're going to produce something that is, which is cucumbers in this case. And what is a market? Any arrangement in which buyers and sellers interact to determine the price and quantity of goods and services exchanged. That's a market. And a surplus is a market condition in existing at any price where the quantity supplied is greater than the quantity demanded. And a shortage is a market condition existing at any price where the quantity supplied is less than the quantity demanded. So we just had shortages during the COVID last year. We had shortages of paper towels and toilet paper and some other things because the market conditions, you know, at any price, people were buying toilet paper. It didn't matter, you know, what the price was, you were going to pay for it because you needed it. So an equilibrium is a market condition where the quantity demanded and the quantity supplied are equal. They're exactly the same. And that is it's rare that that happens, but that's what a market working at efficiency it strives for, is that the quantity supplied is exactly the same as the quantity demanded. So demand and supply and equilibrium for sneakers. So let's look at this at a price per pair, and this is pretty intuitive, right? The higher the price, the less people are going to demand them. So you can see in the demanded column, as the price goes down, the quantity demanded goes up. The quantity supplied is inverse to that. So the higher the price, the more is supplied because producers want you to buy that product. And then there's a difference creating a market condition of a surplus or an equilibrium or a shortage. And when there's a surplus, there's a downward pressure on price. So people will start, or retailers and manufacturers will start reducing price to sell their surplus. And where there's a shortage, there's an upward pressure. Okay, so let's look at the chart here. This is the supply and demand for sneakers. And there is a little bit of a error on this chart, I believe. So I checked this out and I was kind of disappointed on it, but I'm going to tell you what it is, so you're going to be fine. Okay, so when we look at this, Exhibit 12, we're saying that there's a surplus of 40,000 pairs of sneakers. However, this isn't really right, because at 90, we're saying that the surplus is going to be, it should really be 60, because when we're saying that at the price of $90 per pair, we're only going to supply 20,000 pairs of sneakers per year, right? This is what we're going to supply. And the surplus, oh, I'm sorry, this is what's going to be demanded. 20,000 will be demanded. At $90,000, the manufacturers are going to supply 80,000 pairs of sneakers. So we actually have a surplus of 60,000 pairs here, not 40. And down here, we're going to have a shortage because at $30 a pair, we're going to have 80,000 pairs demanded, but only 20,000 supplied. So the way that you know your shortage or your surplus is by subtracting these two items, right? So 80 minus 20 is 60. Now this could be on a different, if this was 90 and this could be on a different dot here, but just in this particular case, this should have been 60. But you can see how that works, right? So, and this is equilibrium. So at 60, we're supplying at $60 a pair, at $60 a pair, we're supplying 50,000 pairs of sneakers, and that's perfect. So what is the price system? Which is a mechanism that uses the forces of supply and demand to create an equilibrium through rising and falling prices. This is what we're always striving for in a free market, is that the supply and demand will be the same, and you're always striving for that. And that's the end of chapter 3. So I hope this was a helpful video, and I'm going to try to do, video 4 pretty soon. So just keep in mind to make sure that you're looking at those charts and graphs, because that's really what's going to help you, particularly if you're having difficulty understanding the reading. If you look at the charts and graphs, it should help you clear things up. All right, I will see you next time.